The mud was thick under her boots as Sarah Chun collapsed for the third time that morning. Around her, fellow recruits moved with precision she could never match. Her rifle felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her lungs burned. Her legs shook. Every drill instructor's eyes seemed to follow her failures with growing disappointment. But what happened next would transform not just Sarah's military career, but the way she saw herself forever. Sometimes the most powerful changes come not from grand speeches or dramatic moments, but from two simple words that cut through all the noise and reach straight to your soul. This is the true story of how those two words changed everything. Sarah Chun had always been small. At 5 feet 2 inches and barely weighing 110 pounds, she looked more like she belonged in a library than a military training facility. But size had never stopped her before. She had graduated top of her engineering class, earned 3 academic scholarships, and could solve complex mathematical problems that left her classmates scratching their heads. Intelligence had always been her superpower. That confidence crumbled on her first day at Fort Benning. The morning alarm shrieked at 4:30, jolting her from a restless sleep. Sarah fumbled in the darkness, her hands shaking as she pulled on the camouflage uniform that seemed to swallow her small frame. Around her, other female recruits moved with varying degrees of preparation. Some had clearly trained for this moment their entire lives. Others, like Sarah, were learning that mental preparation meant nothing when your body had to perform. Move, move, move. Drill Sergeant Martinez's voice boomed through the barracks. You have exactly 4 minutes to be outside in formation. Sarah's fingers fumbled with her bootlaces. She had practiced this routine dozens of times at home, but under pressure, everything felt foreign. The boots were standard issue, designed for feet much larger than hers. Even with the tightest lacing, they felt loose and unstable. She grabbed her rifle and rushed outside, already behind the others. The morning air was crisp and unforgiving. 48 recruits stood in perfect rows, their breathing visible in small white puffs. Sarah found her assigned spot and tried to mirror the stance of those around her. Her rifle felt impossibly heavy in her small hands. She had fired weapons before during her pre-military training, but holding one for extended periods was entirely different. Today we begin combat readiness drills, Sergeant Martinez announced, his voice carrying across the formation. These exercises will determine whether you have what it takes to protect your fellow soldiers in real combat situations. Failure is not an option because failure in the field means death. Sarah's stomach tightened. She knew this day was coming, but hearing it stated so bluntly made her heart race. She looked around at her fellow recruits. Many were significantly larger than her. Some had obvious athletic builds. Others carried themselves with the confidence that suggested prior military experience in their families. The first drill was a basic obstacle course. Sarah watched as the first group navigated rope climbs, wall scaling, and crawling sections. They moved with purpose and strength. When her turn came, she approached the first obstacle with determination. The rope climb defeated her immediately. Her small hands couldn't maintain grip strength for more than a few seconds. She fell twice before finally abandoning the attempt and running around the obstacle, earning disapproving looks from the instructors. The wall scaling went slightly better, but her lack of upper body strength was obvious to everyone watching. By the time she reached the crawling section, mud had soaked through her uniform. Her knees and elbows were scraped raw. Other recruits had finished the course minutes before her. She crawled under the barbed wire, feeling every inch of the cold, wet ground seeping through her clothing. Chun, Sergeant Martinez's voice cut through her concentration. Pick up the pace. Your slow movement is putting your entire unit at risk. Sarah tried to move faster, but her muscles were already screaming in protest. Her rifle caught on the barbed wire above her, forcing her to stop and carefully extract it. By the time she emerged from the crawling section, she was dead last by nearly 2 minutes. The marksmanship drill followed immediately. Sarah's hands shook as she lifted her rifle. The weight that had felt manageable during training now seemed impossible to control steadily. Her first 3 shots missed the target completely. She could hear whispers from other recruits behind her. Take your time, Chun, called Instructor Williams, though his tone suggested patience was running thin. Accuracy matters more than speed. Sarah forced herself to slow down. She controlled her breathing the way she had been taught. Her 4th shot hit the outer edge of the target. The 5th missed again. Out of 10 shots, only 3 found their mark, and none in the central scoring zones. Around her, other recruits were consistently hitting center mass. Some achieved perfect scores. Sarah's target looked embarrassingly sparse with its 3 scattered bullet holes. The tactical movement exercise proved even more challenging. Recruits had to move from cover to cover while carrying full gear and maintaining communication with their unit. Sarah's smaller stride meant she fell behind immediately. Her gear felt disproportionately heavy, throwing off her balance with every movement. "Chun, you're exposing your entire squad," Sergeant Rodriguez shouted. "In real combat, your slow movement would get everyone killed." The words hit harder than any physical challenge. Sarah had joined the military to serve others, to use her intelligence and dedication to protect people. Hearing that her limitations could endanger others was devastating. She pushed harder, trying to keep up with her squad's movement pattern. But pushing beyond her physical capabilities only led to mistakes. She tripped over her own feet, sending her rifle clattering across the ground. As she scrambled to retrieve it, her squad had to halt their advance, creating exactly the kind of dangerous exposure the exercise was designed to avoid. During the lunch break, Sarah sat alone at the edge of the mess hall. She picked at her food without appetite, replaying every failure from the morning. Other recruits chatted excitedly about the exercises, comparing scores and techniques. Their enthusiasm only highlighted how out of place she felt. "Having trouble out there?" asked Jessica, a recruit from Sarah's barracks who had performed exceptionally well in every exercise. Sarah looked up, expecting mockery, but Jessica's expression seemed genuinely concerned. "I don't think I'm cut out for this," Sarah admitted quietly. "I can solve engineering problems that would stump most people, but I can't even climb a simple rope." "Different skills," Jessica replied, sitting down across from her. "I've been training for this my whole life. My dad was Army, my brother too. But I couldn't solve the kind of problems you can. That has to count for something." Sarah appreciated Jessica's kindness, but it didn't change the reality of her situation. Physical requirements weren't optional in military service. Intelligence meant nothing if she couldn't perform basic combat functions. The afternoon brought urban combat simulation. Recruits had to navigate a mock city environment, identifying threats and responding to various scenarios. Sarah hoped this exercise might favor strategic thinking over pure physical ability. She was wrong. The simulation required quick movement between buildings, rapid weapon deployment, and split-second decision-making under physical stress. Sarah's legs were already exhausted from the morning's exercises. Her movements were slow and labored. When simulated enemy fire erupted around her, she froze instead of taking immediate cover. "Chun, you're hit," called the exercise supervisor. "Your hesitation just cost your life, and potentially your squad's lives." Sarah wanted to explain that she was thinking, analyzing the best tactical response. But the simulation didn't allow time for analysis. It demanded instant, physical reaction. By evening formation, Sarah's confidence was completely shattered. She stood in line with the other recruits, but felt completely separate from them. They looked like soldiers. She looked like someone playing dress-up in oversized military clothing. Commander Patricia Hayes walked down the line during evening inspection. Sarah had heard stories about Commander Hayes. She was a decorated combat veteran who had served in 3 deployments. She was known for her fairness, but also for her uncompromising standards. Commander Hayes stopped in front of Sarah. For a long moment, she simply looked at her, taking in her small frame and obvious exhaustion. "Recruit Chun," Commander Hayes said finally. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, trying to inject strength into her voice. "Follow me." Sarah's heart sank. This was it. She was being dismissed from the program. All her dreams of military service, all her hopes of serving something bigger than herself, were about to end in private conversation with the base commander. She followed Commander Hayes to a small office building adjacent to the main training facilities. The commander's office was sparse but organized, with commendations and photographs from various military operations covering one wall. Commander Hayes gestured for Sarah to sit, then took the chair across from her. For several minutes, neither spoke. Sarah stared at her hands, expecting to be told she wasn't suited for military service. "Tell me why you joined," Commander Hayes said finally. Sarah looked up, surprised by the question. She had expected immediate dismissal, not conversation. "I wanted to serve," Sarah said honestly. "I have skills that could help people. Intelligence analysis, strategic planning, technical problem solving. I thought the military could use those abilities. And now I'm not sure I belong here at all," Sarah admitted. "I can't keep up physically. I'm putting other people at risk. Maybe I should find another way to serve." Commander Hayes leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah with an expression that was impossible to read. "I've been watching you today," the commander said. You're right about your physical limitations. You're smaller and weaker than most recruits. Your performance on standard combat exercises has been poor. Each word felt like a punch to Sarah's stomach. She had expected this assessment, but hearing it stated so directly was brutal. But, Commander Hayes continued, I also noticed something else. Sarah looked up hopefully. During the urban simulation, when your squad was pinned down by simulated enemy fire, what did you do? Sarah tried to remember. The exercise had been such a blur of failure that specific moments were hard to recall. I was trying to find alternative routes, Sarah said slowly. The direct approach wasn't working, so I was looking for ways to flank the enemy position. Exactly, Commander Hayes said. While other recruits were focused on returning fire, you were thinking strategically. Your physical response was slow, but your tactical thinking was sound. Sarah felt a tiny spark of hope, but tried not to let it grow too large. During marksmanship training, what happened after your first few missed shots? I adjusted my stance and breathing technique, Sarah replied. I was trying to compensate for the rifle's weight affecting my stability. Right again, Commander Hayes said. Most recruits, when they're struggling, just try harder. You analyzed the problem and adapted your approach. Sarah still wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but the commander's tone had shifted from critical to something that might have been encouraging. Recruit Chun, Commander Hayes said, leaning forward, military service isn't just about physical strength. We need strategists, analysts, and problem solvers. But every soldier, regardless of their primary role, needs to meet basic combat standards. Sarah nodded, understanding that the conversation was leading back to her dismissal. The question, Commander Hayes continued, is whether you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked in your life to meet those standards. Sarah's head snapped up. This wasn't dismissal. This was a challenge. Yes, ma'am, Sarah said without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes. Commander Hayes smiled for the first time since Sarah had met her. Good, she said, because I'm going to tell you something that might change how you approach this challenge. Sarah waited, her heart pounding. Commander Hayes leaned forward and spoke just 2 words that would transform everything Sarah thought she knew about herself and her potential. The words hung in the air between them, simple but powerful. Sarah felt something shift inside her, a fundamental change in how she understood her own capabilities and limitations. These 2 words would become the foundation of everything that followed, the key that would unlock potential she never knew she possessed. But that transformation would require her to completely reimagine what strength could look like, and to discover that the greatest battles are often fought not against external enemies, but against the limitations we impose on ourselves. The 2 words Commander Hayes spoke were deceptively simple. Think different. Sarah stared at the commander, waiting for more explanation, but Commander Hayes simply smiled and let the words settle. I don't understand, Sarah finally said. You've been trying to succeed by becoming someone you're not, Commander Hayes explained. You're attempting to match the physical capabilities of recruits who have natural advantages you'll never possess. That's not thinking different. That's thinking conventional. Sarah felt confused. Everything about military training seemed to demand conformity, meeting standard requirements, performing at established benchmarks. Ma'am, the physical standards are what they are. I can't change the requirements. No, Commander Hayes agreed. But you can change how you meet them. The commander stood and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds where recruits were still conducting evening exercises. Tell me about your engineering background, she said. I studied mechanical and systems engineering, Sarah replied, uncertain where this was leading. I specialized in efficiency optimization and problem solving in constrained environments. And when you encountered engineering problems that seemed impossible with conventional approaches, what did you do? Understanding began to dawn on Sarah. I looked for alternative solutions. Different materials, different processes, different applications of the same principles. Exactly. Commander Hayes turned back to face her. You solved engineering problems by thinking different. Now you need to apply that same mindset to military training. Sarah's mind began racing. She had been approaching every exercise as if there was only one correct method, trying to replicate exactly what larger, stronger recruits were doing. But engineering had taught her that multiple solutions could exist for the same problem. Can you give me an example? Sarah asked. Commander Hayes smiled. Tomorrow's exercise is a 15-mile march with full gear. Standard approach is to maintain steady pace and power through fatigue. How might you think different? Sarah considered the challenge. Her smaller frame meant she carried proportionally more weight relative to her body mass. Her shorter stride required more steps to cover the same distance. Conventional wisdom said she needed to build more strength and endurance. But what if she approached it like an engineering problem? Weight distribution, Sarah said slowly. I could modify how my gear is arranged to optimize balance and reduce strain on my weakest points. Good. What else? Pacing strategy. Instead of maintaining steady speed, I could vary my pace to work with my natural energy cycles and recovery patterns. Better. What about the route itself? Sarah's engineering mind engaged fully. Terrain analysis. If I study the route in advance, I can identify where my size might be an advantage or disadvantage and adjust my approach accordingly. Commander Hayes nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking different. Sarah felt a surge of excitement she hadn't experienced since arriving at Fort Benning. This was familiar territory. This was problem-solving, her actual strength. But, ma'am, Sarah said, bringing herself back to reality. Even with optimization, I still need to build physical capability. I can't engineer my way out of basic fitness requirements. True, Commander Hayes agreed. But you can engineer a more efficient path to fitness. Tell me, what's the difference between working harder and working smarter? Sarah thought about her engineering projects. The best solutions were never about brute force application. They were about understanding systems, identifying leverage points, and applying effort where it would have maximum impact. Working harder means putting in more effort using the same methods. Working smarter means finding methods that produce better results with the same effort. Apply that to your fitness challenge. Sarah's mind began mapping possibilities. Instead of trying to build strength through conventional exercises that don't suit my body type, I could focus on exercises that work with my natural mechanics, such as bodyweight exercises that use leverage rather than mass, resistance training that emphasizes technique over weight, cardiovascular training that builds efficiency rather than just raw power. Commander Hayes pulled out a notepad and began writing. Tomorrow morning, report to me at 0500 hours. We're going to start your alternative training program. Sarah felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. Will this be in addition to regular training? For the next 2 weeks, yes. You'll participate in all standard exercises with your unit, but you'll also begin developing your customized approach. After 2 weeks, we'll evaluate your progress and decide how to proceed. As Sarah walked back to the barracks, her mind was spinning with possibilities. She had always been taught that military training was about conformity, about fitting into established systems. The idea that she could bring her engineering mindset to bear on military challenges felt revolutionary. That night, while other recruits slept, Sarah lay awake planning. She visualized each exercise from the day, analyzing them as she would any engineering problem. What were the core requirements? What alternative approaches might achieve the same goals? Where could she apply her natural advantages to compensate for her limitations? The rope climb, for example. She had been trying to muscle her way up using pure arm strength. But rope climbing was really about technique and leverage. Smaller climbers actually had advantages in efficiency and technique if they understood the mechanics properly. The next morning at 5 o'clock sharp, Sarah reported to Commander Hayes. They met at a smaller training area adjacent to the main facilities. Before we begin physical training, Commander Hayes said, I want you to understand something important. Thinking different doesn't mean taking shortcuts or avoiding challenges. It means finding more effective ways to meet those challenges. Sarah nodded, ready to learn. Physical fitness in the military isn't about looking impressive or competing with other soldiers. It's about being able to perform essential functions under stress. Your job is to find the most efficient way for your specific body to achieve that performance. Commander Hayes had prepared a series of modified exercises. Instead of standard rope climbing, they worked on technique-based climbing that emphasized leg strength and body positioning. Instead of standard push-ups, they focused on variations that worked with Sarah's leverage and build strength in her specific weak points. The key, Commander Hayes explained as Sarah practiced, is understanding that your body is a unique system with its own optimal operating parameters. You've been trying to run your system outside those parameters. Sarah found herself succeeding at exercises that had defeated her the day before, not because they were easier, but because they were designed to work with her capabilities rather than against them. After an hour of modified physical training, Commander Hayes moved to tactical exercises. Now we apply the same thinking to combat skills, she said. Yesterday you struggled with the urban simulation because you were trying to react like a larger, more aggressive soldier. But smaller soldiers have different tactical advantages. They work through scenarios where Sarah's size and analytical mind could be assets. Cover and concealment that wouldn't work for larger soldiers. movement patterns that took advantage of her lower profile, strategic thinking that could compensate for slower physical reactions. Your goal isn't to become a different type of soldier, Commander Hayes explained. It's to become the best version of the soldier you naturally are. Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into this new approach with the same intensity she had once applied to engineering problems. She studied biomechanics to understand how her body could move most efficiently. She analyzed tactical scenarios to identify where her size and intelligence could be advantages rather than limitations. The physical improvements came slowly but steadily. She developed grip strength through techniques suited to smaller hands. She built cardiovascular efficiency through training protocols designed for her body type. Most importantly, she learned to move with confidence rather than constantly fighting against her own limitations. But the mental transformation was even more dramatic. Sarah stopped seeing herself as a deficient soldier trying to become normal. Instead, she began to see herself as a specialized soldier optimizing her unique capabilities. During the week's marksmanship training, Sarah applied engineering principles to her shooting. She analyzed the weapon's mechanics, her body's natural stabilization points, and the environmental factors affecting accuracy. Instead of trying to shoot like other recruits, she developed a shooting style optimized for her specific physical characteristics. Her accuracy improved dramatically, not because she became stronger, but because she understood how to work with her equipment more effectively. The other recruits began to notice. Jessica approached her after a particularly successful shooting session. "Whatever you're doing differently, it's working," Jessica said. "Your scores have improved more in 1 week than most people improve in a month." Sarah smiled, but didn't reveal the full extent of her alternative training. She had learned that some people might see her customized approach as getting special treatment, even though it was actually making her training more challenging, not easier. But the real test came during the week's major exercise, a comprehensive tactical scenario that combined physical movement, marksmanship, problem-solving, and teamwork. Sarah approached it with her new mindset, analyzing it as a complex system with multiple solution paths. When her squad encountered a simulated ambush, Sarah's analytical mind immediately began identifying alternative approaches while other squad members focused on direct response. She noticed tactical opportunities that others missed and suggested movement patterns that took advantage of terrain features. "Chun," called Sergeant Martinez during a brief pause in the exercise, "explain your squad's flanking maneuver." Sarah had suggested a route that avoided direct confrontation by using natural cover and approaching the enemy position from an unexpected angle. It was a strategy that played to their squad's specific composition rather than following standard assault procedures. "We analyzed the enemy's likely sight lines and positioned ourselves to approach outside their optimal engagement zone," Sarah explained. "The route takes longer but reduces exposure and allows us to engage from a position of advantage." Sergeant Martinez studied the tactical map, showing Sarah's suggested route. "Unconventional, but sound," he concluded. "Good tactical thinking." Sarah felt a surge of pride that was different from anything she had experienced during her engineering studies. This was intellectual satisfaction combined with physical accomplishment and the knowledge that her thinking could help protect other soldiers. That evening, Commander Hayes called Sarah to her office for a progress review. "How do you feel about your first week of thinking different?" the commander asked. "Like I'm finally becoming the soldier I was meant to be," Sarah replied honestly. "Not the soldier I thought I had to become." Commander Hayes smiled. "That's the goal. You're learning to optimize your service rather than standardize it." Sarah nodded, but she was also aware that her biggest challenges still lay ahead. The modified training was helping, but she still needed to meet the same standards as every other recruit. Thinking different was giving her better tools, but she still needed to use those tools to achieve demanding objectives. "Ma'am," Sarah said, "I'm grateful for this opportunity, but I know some people might see what I'm doing as getting an unfair advantage." "Are you getting an unfair advantage?" Commander Hayes asked. Sarah considered the question seriously. "No, ma'am. If anything, I'm working harder than before. I'm just working more intelligently." "Then, you have your answer. The military's job is to maximize every soldier's potential in service of our mission. If we have 48 recruits, we want 48 different soldiers, each optimized for their highest contribution." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. She had been so focused on proving she belonged that she had lost sight of why she wanted to belong in the first place. "Your next challenge," Commander Hayes continued, "is to maintain this approach when training becomes more intensive. It's easy to think different when you have time and support. It's harder when you're under pressure. Sarah understood. The real test of her transformation wouldn't come in controlled environments with customized exercises. It would come when she was pushed to her limits alongside her fellow recruits, needing to perform under stress while maintaining her unique approach. But, for the first time since arriving at Fort Benning, Sarah felt genuinely confident about meeting that challenge. She wasn't going to succeed by becoming like everyone else. She was going to succeed by becoming more like herself than she had ever been before. 2 weeks into Sarah's alternative training program, everything changed. The base received word that their training cycle was being accelerated. Instead of the planned 12-week program, recruits would complete their final evaluations in just 8 weeks. The news sent shockwaves through the entire training unit. This means increased intensity for everything, Sergeant Martinez announced during morning formation. Physical standards remain exactly the same, but your time to meet them has been cut by a third. Anyone who can't keep up will be transferred to a later training cycle. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had been making steady progress with her customized approach, but she was still building toward meeting full standards. The accelerated timeline meant she would face her final evaluations before she felt ready. That afternoon, Commander Hayes called Sarah to her office. "I know what you're thinking," the commander said before Sarah could speak. "You're worried that the shortened timeline will derail your progress." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah admitted. "I was counting on having more time to develop my approach." "Time is a luxury soldiers rarely have in real situations," Commander Hayes replied. "This acceleration is actually perfect timing for your development. It forces you to trust your new methods under pressure." Sarah wasn't feeling confident about that trust. Her physical improvements were real, but gradual. Her tactical thinking had developed significantly, but she hadn't yet tested it under maximum stress. "The key," Commander Hayes continued, "is to remember that pressure affects everyone. Your fellow recruits are just as concerned about the accelerated timeline as you are. The question is whether you can use pressure as a tool rather than letting it become an obstacle." Over the next few days, the increased intensity of training was evident everywhere. Recruits who had seemed relaxed and confident began showing signs of stress. Physical injuries became more common as soldiers pushed themselves harder. The atmosphere in the barracks grew tense. Sarah found herself falling back into old patterns of thinking. When faced with increased demands, her instinct was to try harder using conventional methods. She caught herself attempting to match the brute force approaches of larger recruits instead of sticking to her optimized strategies. During a particularly challenging obstacle course run, Sarah abandoned her technique-based rope climbing approach and tried to muscle her way up. She failed spectacularly, falling twice and finishing well behind her previous improved times. "Chun," Sergeant Rodriguez called out. "What happened to your recent improvements? You're regressing." Sarah felt the familiar sting of public failure. Around her, other recruits were struggling too, but her failures always seemed more visible because they came from such obvious physical limitations. That evening, Jessica approached her in the barracks. "You've been different the last few days," Jessica observed. "Earlier in the week, you seemed confident and focused. Now you look like you're back to fighting yourself." Sarah appreciated Jessica's continued friendship, but she wasn't sure how to explain what was happening. "The pressure is getting to me," Sarah admitted. "When everything got more intense, I started doubting my approach. Maybe I was fooling myself about being able to succeed with different methods." Jessica sat on the edge of Sarah's bunk. "Can I tell you something? When you were using your different approach, you inspired me to think about my own training differently. I started paying attention to technique instead of just relying on strength. My performance improved too." Sarah looked up, surprised. "Really? Really? Whatever you were doing, it wasn't just helping you. It was making me a better soldier too." Jessica paused. "Don't abandon what's working just because the pressure increased. That's exactly when you need it most." That night, Sarah lay awake analyzing her recent regression. She realized she had been treating her alternative approach as a crutch rather than as her actual strength. When pressure increased, she had instinctively tried to abandon what made her different and conform to conventional expectations. But conformity was exactly what had been failing her from the beginning. The next morning brought the announcement everyone had been dreading. Final evaluation week would begin in just 10 days. The evaluations would include every aspect of military training they had covered, but with pass/fail standards that allowed no room for partial credit. Sarah made a decision. Instead of increasing her conventional training efforts, she would double down on thinking different. She would approach the final evaluations with complete commitment to her optimized methods, regardless of how they might appear to others. She requested a meeting with Commander Hayes. I want to go all in on the alternative approach for final evaluations, Sarah told the commander. No backup plans, no hedging. If I'm going to succeed or fail, I want it to be as the soldier I actually am, not as a poor imitation of someone else. Commander Hayes studied her carefully. That's a significant risk. If your methods don't work under evaluation pressure, you'll have no fallback position. If they don't work under pressure, then they don't actually work, Sarah replied. I'd rather fail authentically than succeed by pretending to be someone I'm not. Commander Hayes smiled. Now you're really thinking different. Most people want safety nets. Warriors commit to their chosen path. Over the next week, Sarah intensified her customized training while her fellow recruits focused on drilling standard approaches. She worked on perfecting her technique-based rope climbing until she could complete it consistently, even under fatigue. She developed her tactical analysis skills until she could rapidly identify alternative approaches under time pressure. Most importantly, she practiced maintaining her analytical mindset while experiencing physical stress. She learned to think clearly even when her heart rate was elevated and her muscles were screaming for rest. The other recruits began to notice her renewed confidence. Some asked about her training methods, but Sarah had learned to be selective about sharing details. A few genuinely wanted to learn different approaches, but others seemed to view her methods with suspicion, as if she was somehow cheating. Chin's getting special treatment. She overheard one recruit saying. She gets to do easier versions of exercises while we have to do them the hard way. Sarah felt a flare of anger, but forced herself to remain focused. She knew her training was actually more demanding than standard approaches because it required both physical effort and mental analysis. But explaining that to people who were determined to see her as getting unfair advantages would be pointless. 3 days before final evaluations began, the training unit faced their most challenging exercise yet, a comprehensive field scenario that would last 18 hours and combine every skill they had learned. Sarah approached it with complete confidence in her methods. When her squad faced obstacle courses, she used her optimized techniques. When they encountered tactical challenges, she applied analytical thinking to find efficient solutions. When physical demands threatened to overwhelm her, she managed her effort strategically rather than relying on pure endurance. The exercise was brutal for everyone. Several recruits suffered minor injuries from pushing beyond their limits. Others made tactical errors under stress that resulted in simulated casualties. But Sarah found herself performing better than she ever had during training. During a critical moment when her squad was pinned down by simulated enemy fire, Sarah's analytical mind identified a flanking route that other squad members had missed. Her suggestion led to a successful resolution of the scenario. Outstanding tactical thinking, Chun called the exercise supervisor. Your analysis turned a potential failure into a clear victory. Sarah felt a surge of pride that was entirely different from academic achievements. This was the satisfaction of using her intelligence in service of something larger than herself. When the exercise concluded, Sarah's squad had achieved one of the highest performance ratings in their training class. More importantly, she had maintained her alternative approach under extreme pressure and proven that thinking different wasn't just a training accommodation, it was an actual advantage. How do you feel about final evaluations? Jessica asked as they walked back to barracks. Ready, Sarah replied, and for the first time since arriving at Fort Benning, she truly meant it. But she also knew that final evaluations would be unlike anything she had experienced so far. They would be conducted by evaluators who didn't know about her alternative training methods. They would be pass/fail with no opportunity for explanation or context. Her success would depend entirely on results, not on process or potential. The evening before evaluations began, Commander Hayes gathered all recruits for a final address. Tomorrow begins your demonstration that you are ready to serve as soldiers, she announced. Some of you will succeed. Some will not. But every one of you who has worked honestly and given your best effort has already succeeded in the most important way. You have discovered what you are capable of when you commit fully to a demanding goal. Sarah felt those words resonate deeply. Regardless of evaluation outcomes, her time at Fort Benning had transformed her understanding of her own capabilities. She had learned that limitations could be worked with rather than simply accepted or fought against. The military needs many different types of soldiers, Commander Hayes continued. We need soldiers who can charge directly at obstacles and overwhelm them with force. But we also need soldiers who can find alternative paths around obstacles. We need soldiers who can outthink enemies as well as outfight them. Sarah realized the commander was speaking directly to her, acknowledging her journey without singling her out publicly. That night, Sarah prepared her equipment with the same careful attention she had once given to engineering projects. Every piece of gear was optimized for her body type and movement patterns. Her weapon was zeroed perfectly for her shooting stance and grip. Her tactical plan for each evaluation component was clear and rehearsed. But, most importantly, her mindset was clear. She wasn't going into evaluations hoping to prove she could succeed despite her limitations. She was going in confident that she could succeed by optimizing her unique capabilities. The difference was everything. Final evaluation week would test whether all her preparation and mental transformation could translate into performance under the ultimate pressure. Sarah knew that the next 5 days would either validate everything she had learned about thinking different or prove that alternative approaches weren't sufficient for military standards. She was ready to find out which it would be. Final evaluation week began before dawn on a cold Monday morning. Sarah stood in formation with her fellow recruits, each wearing full combat gear and carrying the equipment they would need for 5 days of comprehensive testing. The atmosphere was tense with nervous energy and determined focus. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Colonel Martinez, the senior evaluation officer, "these next 5 days will determine whether you are ready to serve as United States soldiers. There are no second chances, no makeup opportunities, and no partial credit. You either meet the standard or you do not." Sarah felt her heart racing but kept her breathing steady. She had trained for this moment using every technique Commander Hayes had taught her. Her gear was perfectly distributed for her body type. Her mindset was focused on execution rather than outcomes. Day 1 begins with individual physical assessment. Colonel Martinez continued. You will complete the Army Combat Fitness Test, followed by individual tactical movement and marksmanship evaluations. Failure in any component results in immediate dismissal from the program. The first challenge was the rope climb that had defeated Sarah so completely on her first day. She watched as other recruits approached it with varying degrees of confidence. Some attacked it with pure upper body strength. Others struggled and failed. When her turn came, Sarah felt every eye on her. She approached the rope using the technique-based method she had perfected. Instead of trying to muscle her way up, she used her legs to support her weight while her arms guided her movement. Her smaller size actually became an advantage as she moved efficiently without wasting energy on unnecessary muscular tension. Sarah reached the top of the rope in a time that exceeded the minimum requirement. Not the fastest time of the day, but a clear pass. More importantly, she finished without the total exhaustion that had characterized her earlier attempts. Good technique, Chun, called the evaluator, making notes on his clipboard. The obstacle course followed immediately. Sarah navigated each obstacle using the optimized approaches she had developed. Wall climbing using leverage and technique rather than brute force. Crawling sections with strategic gear management. Each movement was purposeful and efficient. When she completed the course, her time was solidly in the passing range. Several recruits who had seemed much stronger than her during early training posted slower times because they had relied on raw strength rather than developing efficient techniques. But the real test came with the 15-mile march carrying full equipment. This was the evaluation Sarah had feared most. Her smaller frame meant she carried proportionally more weight relative to her body mass than larger recruits. Her shorter stride meant more steps to cover the same distance. However, Sarah had prepared for this challenge with engineering precision. She had studied the route topology and weather conditions. She had planned her pacing strategy to optimize her energy expenditure. Most importantly, she had trained her mind to maintain analytical thinking even under physical stress. The march began at a pace that felt comfortable for most recruits. Sarah fell into her planned rhythm, monitoring her heart rate and energy levels while maintaining awareness of terrain changes ahead. Around her, other recruits chatted nervously or focused grimly on simply putting one foot in front of the other. After 5 miles, the first signs of struggle began appearing in the formation. Some recruits were breathing heavily. Others began falling slightly behind the designated pace. Sarah felt fatigue building in her legs, but was still operating within her planned energy budget. At the 10-mile point, the real challenge began. The route turned uphill through rocky terrain that made every step more difficult. Sarah watched several recruits who had seemed strong earlier begin struggling seriously. A few asked for medical evaluation and were removed from the march. This was the moment Sarah had prepared for most intensively. While others fought against the increased difficulty, she adjusted her approach to work with the changed conditions. She shortened her stride to maintain efficiency on steep sections. She used her analytical mind to identify the best foot placement on rocky terrain. Most importantly, she managed her mental energy as carefully as her physical energy. Instead of focusing on the distance remaining or the weight of her pack, she concentrated on executing her technique perfectly for each individual step. Looking strong, Chun called Sergeant Williams as he passed on his monitoring vehicle. Maintain that pace. Sarah felt a surge of confidence, but kept her focus on the immediate challenge. The final 5 miles would determine whether her preparation was truly sufficient. As the march continued, Sarah found herself passing recruits who had started much stronger than her. Not because she had suddenly become more powerful, but because she had trained specifically for sustained performance under difficult conditions. While others were learning that raw strength couldn't substitute for endurance and technique, Sarah was executing a plan designed around her actual capabilities. When she crossed the finish line, Sarah was tired but not exhausted. Her time met the requirement with room to spare. More importantly, she felt confident about her performance rather than relieved to have merely survived. "Excellent march, Chun," said the evaluation officer. "Your pacing and technique were exemplary throughout." Sarah felt a rush of pride that was different from any academic achievement she had ever experienced. This was the satisfaction of physical and mental preparation coming together under pressure to achieve a demanding goal. Day 2 brought marksmanship evaluations. Sarah approached the firing line with her weapon configured exactly for her body mechanics and shooting style. She had spent countless hours perfecting her stance, grip, and breathing technique to optimize accuracy with her specific physical characteristics. The targets appeared at various distances and angles, simulating real combat conditions. Sarah's engineering mind automatically calculated wind effects, distance adjustments, and optimal timing. But, more importantly, her body executed the shooting mechanics she had trained to become automatic. Her first shot hit center mass. Her second and third shots created a tight grouping in the high-scoring zone. As the evaluation continued, Sarah maintained consistent accuracy across all target presentations. When scoring was complete, Sarah had achieved marksman qualification, not the highest level possible, but a solid, respectable score that demonstrated real competency with her weapon. Several recruits who had started as stronger shooters performed worse under evaluation pressure. "Consistent performance," Chun noted the marksmanship instructor. "You maintain technique under stress." Day 3 focused on tactical knowledge and leadership under pressure. Sarah found herself in simulated combat scenarios where she had to make rapid decisions while managing simulated casualties and coordinating with team members. This was where her analytical training truly shined. While other recruits sometimes made emotional decisions under pressure, Sarah maintained her systematic approach to problem solving. She analyzed each scenario as a complex system with multiple variables and solution paths. During one particularly challenging simulation, Sarah's squad faced a situation where conventional tactics would likely result in heavy casualties. While her squad leader prepared to order a direct assault, Sarah quickly identified an alternative approach that would achieve the same objective with significantly less risk. "Sir," she addressed the squad leader respectfully, "request permission to suggest an alternative route." The squad leader, another recruit who was being evaluated on leadership decisions, looked frustrated by the complication but nodded for her to proceed. Sarah quickly outlined a flanking maneuver that would take advantage of natural cover while approaching the objective from an unexpected angle. It required more coordination, but offered much better tactical positioning. The squad leader considered her suggestion for several crucial seconds before nodding approval. "Good thinking, Chun. We'll execute your route." The alternative approach succeeded completely, allowing the squad to achieve their objective without any simulated casualties. The evaluating officer made extensive notes about both the squad leader's willingness to accept good advice and Sarah's ability to develop sound tactical alternatives under pressure. "Outstanding tactical analysis, Chun," the evaluator told her afterward. "That kind of thinking saves lives in real operations." Sarah felt the deep satisfaction of knowing her intelligence could contribute meaningfully to protecting other soldiers. This was exactly why she had wanted to join the military in the first place. Day 4 brought the most comprehensive challenge, a combined exercise that required sustained physical performance while executing complex tactical missions over a 12-hour period. Sarah would need to demonstrate that her alternative approaches could work not just in isolated tests, but in sustained, multifaceted operations. The exercise began with a pre-dawn movement to contact, requiring stealth and physical endurance. Sarah's squad had to navigate several miles of difficult terrain while remaining undetected by simulated enemies. Sarah found herself naturally falling into a supporting role for her squad's movement. Her smaller size made her naturally less visible, and her analytical mind helped identify the safest routes through dangerous areas. But she also needed to maintain the physical pace required to keep the squad moving efficiently. As the exercise progressed through various phases, reconnaissance, direct action, and extraction, Sarah consistently contributed both physical performance and tactical thinking. She wasn't the strongest or fastest member of her squad, but she proved to be reliable and valuable across all mission requirements. During a critical moment when the squad was pinned down by superior simulated enemy forces, Sarah identified a weakness in the enemy's positioning that allowed her squad to break contact and complete their mission. Her tactical contribution directly enabled mission success. Chun, called the exercise controller, explain your analysis of the tactical situation. Sarah provided a clear, concise explanation of how she had identified the enemy's vulnerability and developed the squad's escape route. The controller nodded approvingly and made detailed notes. When the 12-hour exercise concluded, Sarah was exhausted but victorious. She had demonstrated sustained performance across all required competencies while maintaining her analytical edge throughout the operation. Solid performance across all mission phases, the lead evaluator told her squad. Each of you contributed essential capabilities to mission success. Sarah felt a deep sense of accomplishment, but she also knew that her most difficult challenge still lay ahead. Day 5 would bring the final comprehensive evaluation, a culminating exercise that would test everything she had learned under maximum pressure with no opportunity for recovery if anything went wrong. As she prepared her equipment that evening, Sarah reflected on how completely her experience had transformed since her arrival at Fort Benning. She was still the same person with the same physical limitations, but her understanding of what those limitations meant had changed completely. She wasn't a deficient soldier trying to compensate for weaknesses. She was a capable soldier who had learned to optimize her unique strengths in service of military objectives. The difference in mindset made all the difference in performance. Tomorrow would prove whether that transformation was complete. The final day of evaluation arrived with an unseasonably cold dawn. Sarah woke before her alarm, her mind already focused on the comprehensive test ahead. Around her, other recruits stirred restlessly, the tension in the barracks thick enough to cut. Some had already passed enough components to guarantee graduation. Others knew they were on the borderline. Sarah fell somewhere in between. She had performed well, but today's final exercise would determine whether her transformation was truly complete. Final exercise begins in 30 minutes, announced Drill Sergeant Martinez. This will be your demonstration that you can perform as soldiers under realistic combat conditions. There are no do-overs, no partial credit, and no excuses. You either meet the standard or you do not. Sarah completed her pre-mission preparation with the methodical precision she had developed over the past weeks. Every piece of equipment was positioned optimally for her body mechanics. Her weapon was clean and properly zeroed. Her tactical plan was clear but flexible enough to adapt to changing conditions. But most importantly, her mindset was calm and confident. She no longer approached challenges wondering if she could succeed. She approached them focused on executing the methods she knew would work. The final exercise was designed to be the ultimate test of military readiness. Squads would conduct a complex mission involving infiltration, reconnaissance, direct action, and extraction over a 16-hour period. They would face multiple unexpected complications requiring both physical performance and tactical adaptation. Sarah's squad consisted of 8 recruits who had trained together throughout the program. She knew each member's strengths and weaknesses, and they knew hers. More importantly, they had learned to work together as a team rather than as individuals trying to prove themselves. Squad leaders, called Colonel Martinez, receive your mission briefing. Sarah wasn't the designated squad leader, but she had been selected as the assistant squad leader based on her consistent tactical performance during previous evaluations. This meant she would need to demonstrate leadership capabilities in addition to individual performance. The mission briefing revealed a complex scenario. Their squad would infiltrate a simulated enemy compound, gather intelligence on enemy capabilities, neutralize specific targets, and extract without detection. Multiple contingency plans would be required because the exercise would include unexpected complications designed to test adaptability. Sarah studied the mission details with her engineering mind, analyzing the operation as a complex system with multiple variables and potential failure points. She identified several areas where alternative approaches might be necessary and began developing backup plans. Chun called the squad leader, Recruit Davis. What's your analysis of the infiltration route? Sarah had been studying the terrain maps and aerial photographs. The primary route offers good concealment, but requires crossing two open areas where we'd be exposed. I recommend we plan for a longer alternative route that maintains cover throughout, in case we encounter unexpected enemy activity. Davis considered her suggestion. Show me on the map. Sarah outlined the alternative route, explaining how it would add time, but eliminate exposure risks. Davis nodded approvingly and incorporated her suggestion into the squad's operational plan. As the exercise began, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came from thorough preparation combined with confidence in her methods. Her squad moved out in tactical formation, with Sarah positioned where she could contribute both to navigation and to tactical awareness. The first several hours of the mission proceeded according to plan. Sarah's smaller size proved advantageous during the infiltration phase, as she could move through concealment that wouldn't accommodate larger soldiers. Her analytical mind continuously processed environmental information, identifying potential threats and opportunities. But then, the first major complication arose. "Contact front," whispered Davis over the communication system. "Enemy patrol approaching our position." Not on the intelligence briefing. Sarah immediately analyzed the tactical situation. The enemy patrol would pass within 50 meters of their concealed position. Moving to avoid detection would require abandoning their planned route and timeline. Standing and fighting would compromise the stealth essential to mission success. "Squad leader," Sarah whispered, "request permission to recommend course of action." Davis looked at her questioningly, but nodded permission. "We can let them pass and continue original plan, but that puts us behind timeline and possibly walking into a trap if this is part of increased enemy activity," Sarah explained quickly. "Or we can relocate now using the alternative infiltration route I identified earlier. It adds 2 hours but keeps us undetected and away from potential follow-on patrols." Davis had less than 30 seconds to make a decision that would affect the entire mission. Sarah watched him process the options while the enemy patrol continued approaching. "We relocate," Davis decided. "Chun, lead us through your alternative route." Sarah felt a surge of responsibility and determination. Her tactical analysis had just become the foundation of their mission success or failure. She led the squad through the more circuitous route she had planned, maintaining stealth while keeping them on track toward their objective. The alternative route worked perfectly. Not only did it avoid the enemy patrol, but it positioned the squad for a better approach to their primary objective. What had initially seemed like a setback became an advantage because they had been prepared with multiple options. "Outstanding adaptation, Chun," Davis told her as they reached their reconnaissance position. "Your backup planning saved the mission." The reconnaissance phase tested Sarah's ability to gather and analyze information under pressure. While other squad members provided security, she used her analytical skills to assess enemy capabilities and identify target priorities. Her engineering background proved invaluable in understanding the technical systems they needed to gather intelligence about. "Chun," Davis called softly, "what's your assessment of enemy defensive positions?" Sarah had been systematically analyzing the compound's defensive setup. They have good coverage of the main approaches, but there's a blind spot on the eastern side where their fields of fire don't overlap. We can exploit that for the direct action phase. Sarah's tactical analysis became the foundation for their assault plan. Her ability to understand systems and identify weaknesses translated directly into military tactical thinking. When the direct action phase began, Sarah found herself tested on every aspect of her development. She needed to maintain physical performance under stress while executing precise tactical movements and contributing to squad decision-making. The assault on the simulated enemy position required each squad member to perform multiple demanding tasks simultaneously. Sarah moved through her assigned approach route using the efficient movement techniques she had mastered. Her weapon handling was smooth and confident. Most importantly, she maintained tactical awareness throughout the operation. When unexpected enemy reinforcements appeared, threatening to overwhelm the squad's position, Sarah immediately identified an alternative withdrawal route that would maintain mission success while minimizing casualties. "Squad leader," she called urgently, "we have an exit route through the north wall that avoids the reinforcements approach." Davis trusted her judgment without hesitation. Lead the way, Chun. Sarah guided her squad through the tactical withdrawal she had identified, allowing them to complete their mission objectives and extract successfully despite the complication. As the 16-hour exercise concluded, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. She had demonstrated sustained performance across every required military competency while maintaining her analytical edge throughout extended operations under pressure. Squad debrief, called the evaluation officer. I want each member's assessment of squad performance and individual contributions. When the evaluator reached Sarah, she provided a clear analysis of the mission's tactical challenges and how the squad had adapted to overcome them. Her ability to think strategically about the overall operation impressed the evaluating officers. Outstanding tactical thinking throughout the exercise, Chun, the lead evaluator told her. Your analysis and adaptation directly contributed to mission success. But the real moment of truth came that evening during the final formation. All recruits gathered to learn who had successfully completed the program and who would need additional training. When I call your name, announced Colonel Martinez, you have successfully completed basic military training and are qualified to serve as United States soldiers. Sarah's heart pounded as names were called. Some recruits she expected to succeed. Others surprised her. A few who had seemed strongest during early training were not called, their names absent from the graduation list. Chun, Sarah. Hearing her name called felt like the culmination of everything she had learned and overcome. She had succeeded not despite her limitations, but by learning to optimize her unique capabilities in service of military objectives. After the ceremony, Commander Hayes approached her. How do you feel, soldier? The commander asked, emphasizing Sarah's new designation. Ready to serve, Sarah replied honestly. But, more than that, I feel like I finally understand what I'm capable of when I think different instead of thinking conventional. Commander Hayes smiled. That lesson will serve you throughout your military career. The best soldiers are those who can adapt their approach to meet any challenge while maintaining their core principles. Sarah nodded, understanding that her transformation was complete, but her journey as a soldier was just beginning. Later that evening, Jessica approached her during the graduation celebration. I wanted to thank you, Jessica said. For what? For showing me that there's more than one way to be a good soldier. Watching you develop your own approach made me think about how to optimize my own strengths instead of just following standard procedures. Sarah realized that her journey had influenced others in ways she hadn't expected. By learning to think different, she had given others permission to find their own optimized approaches to military service. As she prepared for her next assignment, Sarah reflected on the two words that had changed everything. Think different. They had transformed her from someone trying to conform to military standards into someone who could meet those standards by optimizing her unique capabilities. But, more than that, those words had taught her that success often comes not from overcoming limitations, but from finding ways to work with limitations to achieve objectives that matter. Her physical size would never change. Her analytical mind would always be her greatest strength. The difference was that she now understood how to apply both characteristics in service of something larger than herself. 3 months later, Sarah received her first assignment to a military intelligence unit where her analytical skills and tactical thinking would be essential to mission success. She reported to her new commander with complete confidence in her abilities and clear understanding of how she could contribute. Soldier Chun, her new commander said during their first meeting, I've reviewed your training records. I understand you had some unique approaches to meeting military standards. Yes, sir, Sarah replied. I learned to optimize my performance by working with my natural capabilities rather than against them. Outstanding, the commander said. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need for the challenges we face. Your job will be to analyze complex situations and identify solutions that others might miss. Sarah smiled, understanding that her transformation was not just complete, but had prepared her perfectly for the service she had always wanted to provide. The two words, think different, had changed everything. They had transformed her from someone struggling to meet standards into someone whose unique approach to meeting standards made her valuable to the military mission. But, more importantly, they had taught her that the greatest limitations are often the ones we impose on ourselves by accepting that there's only one right way to succeed. Sometimes the most powerful change comes not from becoming someone different, but from becoming more authentically yourself than you ever believed possible. Sarah's story became part of Fort Benning's training legacy, used to teach future recruits that military excellence comes in many forms. Her example showed that success requires not conformity, but optimization, finding the most effective way for each individual to contribute to shared objectives. The small woman who had once collapsed in the mud during basic combat drills had become a soldier whose tactical thinking and optimized performance made her an asset to every unit she joined. She had learned that strength comes in many forms, and that thinking different isn't a limitation to overcome, but an advantage to embrace. Her transformation was complete, but her service had just begun.